No.
It made me laugh this morning.
That's false.
Yeah. Not even capitalized.
Nope.
That taco is not hot pepper.
That was spicy.
We went to Bruce's for breakfast. I was down there. I think that was 6:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said you were out.
It was awesome. It was good. Thanks for having me back. And then the bakery across the street.
Yeah.
Coconut milk, which I love. So I got those.
Yeah. Yeah. Coordinate all my rides. Did you drive? Just here's your tickets, show up here, so yeah, and that's where we didn't register ourselves and we asked if we wanted. So next year, next year, before she gets on it, we'll go.
All right, so I'm going to start because we try to stick to a schedule. I also have a really big issue with standing in one place. So I apologize for the live streaming stuff, but I personally cannot stand in front of a speaking device. So I will likely be moving around and walking around and talking. I'll use a large voice if I have to. But putting me in front of this thing is not conducive to how I am. So with that being said, I'm going away from the mic. I can't do it. All right, so my name's Daniel Mark. You're here for the session on the T in STEM. I'm going to present to you a lot of the different things that I do in my classroom. I'm not necessarily going to present to you how I set up the lessons, okay? So I'm going to go through a lot of information of the different projects, how I grade the projects, how I try to simplify my life and the student lives, give you a whole bunch of different information. That being said, there's a whole series of lessons that I do leading up to a lot of the projects you're going to see that I'm not necessarily talking about. So if I show you a robotic challenge that I do and you want more information on how I lead up to that challenge, just contact me, reach out to me. But we start with the intro here. Who am I? So I'm Daniel Mark. I teach the STEM program. In 30 seconds, about me. I taught in Reading School District, urban inner city for 9 years. Loved it. An opportunity came up at Brandywine to create the STEM program, and I took it. So I've now been at Brandywine Heights for 4 years. Literally teach grades 4 through 8. We're in the same building. We're in a unique situation there. And what they ended up doing is they took the computer teacher and made the computer teacher a tech integrator, which is very common right now, which freed up a specialist rotation. So the computer teacher is tech integrator pushing into classrooms. That freed up a rotation spot for specialists. So the students rotate to me just like they do gym, library, art. They cycle through. So from a middle school perspective, I see them 45 times a semester. And then from the elementary, fourth grade, fifth grade, I see them about 30. So that's kind of how it breaks down. Every grade level, we focus on these concepts. So we do design challenges. We do computer science / computational thinking. We do 3D printing in some of the grades. We do EV3 robotics and a lot of other things. So this session today is walking through some of those different projects and ideas that I have to share with you. At the end of the presentation, I do have a link for my presentation. So at the end, you can take that link, because in the presentation, there's links to like assessment rubrics I have set up that if you want to steal and recreate for yourself, take it. There's some other links of information. So you'll have that at the end. If you want it, you can take it and kind of copy and do whatever you want. All right. From a computer standpoint, I think it's important to know the school. So we have one-to-one grades 4 through 8. Everyone has an HP computer. I'm an Apple person. I love Apple. So it's a learning curve for me at times using HP computers, but that's what we have. And then we do have an iPad cart in the library that we have access to. All right. So computer science. So I'm going to kind of take you through what I do. I'm sure many of you in here are now familiar with computational thinking. And it's not so much computer science anymore, but it's computational thinking. And there's a whole pathway for that now in terms of algorithms. We do them every day. That's our lives. Patterns, decomposition, abstraction. So I'm personally now in a cohort of teachers taking classes from Berks County. There's one teacher from every district that's in a class together on computational thinking. So we're trying to now integrate that and push that into our classes and educate fellow teachers in our buildings about that. So my breakdown for computer science or computational thinking is this. Many of this you very well might be familiar with, maybe you're not. Scratch, I'm not really going to talk about Scratch much because I think that's the popular one. So I'm going to, in 4th grade, I do teach Scratch. In 5th grade, we do Code Combat. We do text-based coding, so they're learning Python. You could choose Python or JavaScript. We ended up going with Python. And then 6th grade, we do game development. And I'll talk about in a second, likely be transitioning to Azaria for that. And then 7th grade, we do drones, the Parrot Mambo drones, through Workbench. It's block-based coding, and I like it because you're not flying the drone from your phone or an app, you're coding the drone to do different things, and I'll share some of the stuff I do for that. And then in 8th grade, I have a choose your own pathway. So if we break this down, and if you have questions as we go, just let me know.
with the drones, did your district have to do anything special legally? Because I know my district has talked about that, and they're worried with all the FCC regulations and things. We haven't gotten into drones for that reason.
So I'll talk more about the drones later,
Okay.
but
That's
no, to answer your question, no. If we were taking the drones outside and flying them outside, that's a whole different story.
So you just fly them indoors?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we learned the basic thing in my room a little bit, parameter-wise, and then we go to the cafeteria. And we use the cafeteria space, and I have, you'll see, I have targets set up. But from a part of my whole push with drones, like, so students, well, since we're talking drones real quick, students, in my opinion, if I ask my students when they come into my classroom if they have a drone, several of them do, but none of them realize that if it's over half a pound, you have to register it legally. And like, so they're flying these drones outside that are larger than half a pound, and by law, they're supposed to register that drone, and they don't know that. So part of me teaching drones is teaching them the fact that this is the law, like these are some of the rules behind it that you have to do when you purchase and fly a drone. So some of that is actually teaching them the rules and regulations behind it. But inside of a building, we're fine. So from a scratch-based standpoint, coding-wise, with the fourth graders, I literally model each of these. So again, as I'm modeling these projects, we're teaching loops, we're teaching all these different fundamental skills. But we do a race game. I start off with the race game because it's a 2-player race game and it's super simple to create. They do it with me and they customize it their own way. And then their favorite part is I let them literally just go and play their games, and they play each other's games that they made. And then I model a pong game where you have to keep the ball up in the air, which I'm horrible at. We do a dance, and I like modeling the dance because when we're coding the dance in Scratch, you're doing costume changes, and you're doing you could do background changes and effects and all these different items, which leads me to the simple story. So in fourth grade, I have them create a simple story with me. And I could show you an example at the end if you want. But they create a simple story with me, and I usually try to do a cause and effect relationship. Like the bear is hungry, so the bear needs food. And we create like a cause and effect story. And then from that simple story that I modeled with them, I turn them loose. And I have a rubric, and then they follow the rubric and they create their own story in Scratch. And it seems to be, I'll say this is my 4th year teaching STEM at Brandywine. Every year I've done something different. It's never the same thing. I always add something or do something new. This approach is kind of new for me this year, and the 4th graders love it. And people, like aides, will sit in my classroom and be like, everyone in here is excited to learn. Like, you go into like their core subjects and they're not excited. And I was like, well, I'm trying to tie their core subjects in, right? By creating a cause and effect story, by doing story elements, talking about story elements when they're creating them. We're trying to bridge that gap. So that's Scratch. My logical next step, personally, is many of you have probably seen they have an EV3 extension now, so you can use the Scratch blocks to program the EV3 Lego Mindstorms robots. Instead of using the program software that they have, you can code that. So my logical next step will probably be transitioning in 5th or 6th grade into using the programming blocks for the EV3 Mindstorms. It's kind of where I'm going. So Code Combat and Ozaria, I am not a rep for them at all. When we were developing the program at Brandywine 4 years ago, we looked into many different things, and we ended up going with Code Combat, which is now also Ozaria. It incorporates computational thinking by default. It has great computational thinking ties. It teaches the basic syntax. It really does a nice job of problem solving. The students need to, when they solve a challenge in the game, is anyone familiar with Code Combat? Ozaria? When like the students have to play the level, they really have to think about it before just typing the code. So it's really problem solving, and the majority of the students like it. They're playing a game. So it looks like this, right? So I'll go into the website then, but they have a coding window where they do the text coding, and they're coding a character to do different things and move different places to achieve different challenges. The introductory level, the first level, Introduction to Computer Science, is free. So if you were looking something past the hour of code to try out with your students, I do this in 5th grade. My 5th graders go through the introductory course. That first course is free. Once you get past that, so Game Development 1 and all of the courses past that, that is a license-based issue. I know when we started this process, we sat in a meeting with the owner of Code Combat on a FaceTime call or whatever, and he said the price, and the superintendent and I looked at each other, we're like, nope. But then we ended up negotiating a 6-year term, and the price went down significantly over those 6 years. So we ended up doing it, and it worked out. So it looks a little bit more like this for those of you that have not done it. So you can set up classes. So these are my 5th grade classes right now. You could go in a little bit further, my view, Conrad. So we are literally just wrapping up these last series of coding lessons. So you can see all of the green are students who completed the course, which that's good because I'm not in school right now, but it tells me that they did what they were supposed to do. So there's a few people that haven't finished it yet. They have assessment levels now, which are like combo levels. That tells me, so there's still a bunch of kids that have to finish some of those combo lessons. It tells you what you're teaching, right? So if I come over to combo, that student was working on arguments, variables, and loops and conditionals within the text. If I click on an individual student, it will bring me to that student's account, and then you can see their code. So if I see that a student's stuck on a level, I can go in, look at the code that student wrote, and try to find their mistake. Maybe they're just missing a parenthesis or something and they missed it, and try to help them out. So it does break it down a little bit further that you're able to look and see what the students did. And it tells me if she has a hard time on this concept, it puts her back into 3A, 3B for practice rounds. So it's a neat program. When I teach it, I have the students come up and I'll teach the skill. We hit run and the students act out, right? So when I put a student in a loop, I have a student running into the wall and just kind of leave them there for a little bit. And so we try to make it fun in terms of teaching the basic skills and concepts. And then we apply every like say this first series of lessons, I'll teach the skill that they need for that, and then they go and play up to those levels. And then the next time we'll teach variables or loops. Teach the next lesson, and they'll do that. So it's kind of a progress. Any questions? I'm sorry, what?
Is this the level 1 to 3 level?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you limited to how many students and classes you can have?
No.
How many sessions are in level 1?
So if you come to course guides, if you go to course guides, it has my HP computer, I can't plug my LAN in, so my internet might not allow this. But if you go to course, maybe it'll load. If you go to course guides, it actually they have a curriculum guide made for you, and in Resource Hub too. So they actually have standards, they have everything kind of lined out. Now I kind of do my own thing, but it was a nice framework to get started from. And there's 19 levels in course 1. So whoever asked that, there's 19 levels, plus the challenge levels. But you could go, if it loaded, you could go to the individual levels. So like if I wanted to show a student, I could just go right to level 15 and show that level only. So there you go. So they have a solution set up for you for Python or JavaScript. They have some videos that introduce the idea of syntax to students. Over here are the levels, right? So it goes all the way up to 19. 19 is called the arena, and you have to survive for 90 seconds, but you can code against each other in the class. So quite a few of them like that, but it's worked very well for me. It's a great way for me to introduce the idea of text-based coding and not just block-based coding. So it always kind of gives them an objective of what they have to do. And then there's hints. They'll kind of set them up and then they finish it. So, and they have a word bank over here. If you're not familiar with it, I recommend, if you're looking for something different to try with the students, give it a shot. It is free.
And you pick Python instead of Java? Why?
So the assistant superintendent and I, he was the technology guy at the time, we kind of discussed the different languages and the benefits. And it seemed like Python was a little more user-friendly and more of an upcoming language, so we ended up going with that. And in my personal opinion, like now that we've been looking and learning Python, there's really easy ties into JavaScript in terms of like minor little things here or there. But I think once you understand the language, it's kind of
How much experience did you have with text-based coding? Like I've taken a class on it, but I'm not fluent.
Yeah. So everything I'm presenting to you today, I taught myself. Yeah.
That's kind of what I was hoping
Yeah.
you'd say.
Yeah, so all of these Ozaria, I'll go to Ozaria. This is my next transition. I'm most likely, so this is created by Code Combat. They're literally just launching it now. But I like this, I think, better than Code Combat. Personally, I think it's better designed. And I'm saying that because, so if we go to trial run, like I literally create my own student account, right? So before I have the students do anything, I literally play through everything, and I do everything myself. But I think this, so Moondance is chapter 1, is the introductory level for Ozaria, and that's free. After that, it's licensed. But if we look at Ozaria, has anyone familiar with Ozaria? You've seen that up and coming? It's pretty neat. So if I go to unit progress here, I'll show you one or two things. I like it, so here's the prologue. They have it broken down, objects and methods. I'll show you what it looks like in just 1 second. If I go to unit 1, chapter 1, they have it broken down, debugging. Like for me personally, students oftentimes when they're doing Code Combat or coding in general, they don't debug enough. Like they get frustrated. They're like, why doesn't this work? Well, you're missing a parenthesis, or you didn't have a capital letter, or you missed a quotation mark. It's those simple like debugging and pulling out. Well, this literally focuses a whole session on debugging. And in my opinion, this variables, conditionals. So this next step that they're moving to with Ozaria, I like better. I haven't taught it to the students yet. I've sent it to a few of my, what I would say, coding students that are pretty advanced in coding. And I'd say, here, just try this out. Let me know what you think. So it's probably where I'm going next. It's probably my next move. And they do a little bit more with like cutscenes. They do a little more with vocabulary. If I can, I don't know if I can show you a lesson here. They have, it's a little more game-like too, in my opinion. So this probably won't load because of the computer, but because of the internet, maybe it will. It's
All stories have to start somewhere. Yours began at the foot of the Great Sky Mountain. Your life was simple, but good, until the world became colder, the days became shorter, and even the very sun seemed to be dimming. Your mother, one of the magi of the village.
Yes, the prologue is free. So if we do Up the Mountain, you can just create a teacher account, and the prologue is free. When you get into Unit 1 or Chapter 1, you have to pay. But it's set up very similar to Code Combat.
How long does it take students to play? I mean, obviously that's depending on the student, but are we talking this is going to be 3 lessons or 20? You know, is there a general?
Yeah. So for me, we are probably looking at around 7 or 8 classes. For like the first unit, an introduction in 5th grade, we're looking at 7 or 8 classes that I do this through. And that includes me teaching them the skills and then them playing. And once if somebody gets to level 5, then they're spawned into a helper, and they walk around and help debug and help students. But this is set up very similar to that, where like your object function and you're doing simple text-based coding to solve the challenges, and then you move to the next level. And that's the prologue introductory, but it's a little more modern, in my opinion, than Code Combat. And I know I've talked with teachers throughout Berks County. Some of them are hesitant on Code Combat because it's combat. Some of it's attacking other people, where this is a little less. It's not so much attacking people, it's more or less solving these problems. I think it's great. I am not even teaching it yet. That's probably next year for me, but I think it's a great improvement for them. And if you're looking for something different to do with the students, try it. Set up your own account, play through it, and try it. They'll probably like it, I can tell you. I mean, the majority of the students I teach enjoy it. So that's Ozaria and Code Combat. I do have, in 6th grade, we do Game Development 1. So that's this course. That is not free. But what I like about it is the last level in Game Development 1, they have a blank slate, and they create a game. And it's all from the text coding. So I mean, over here is all the different resources and commands that they can use. They set their own goals, so that they add a defeat goal, they add a collect goal, survival goal. They set their own goals. The goals show up. They spawn the characters. So for this, to win this, you have to do like these 3 things here to beat it, the level. So I made my own rubric, and it's an extended rubric where they have to do X amount of things on the rubric to pass it. So just because they pass this level doesn't mean they're done. They have to complete the rubric I made, and then they're done. And the nice thing is, when they finish, they literally have games that they made with a link that they can send out to whoever. And then they all go into a bank, and they can play each other's games. And I've seen students do the simple, expectation of this is what's expected, that's what I did. And then I've seen students go further and make some really hard, games where I can't beat it. I'm like, how did you beat this? Because you can't pass it unless you beat it. So they get pretty involved. But game development builds on what they did the first level, adds a whole bunch of more functions, and I think is neat because they end up with a game at the end that they coded, not from a block-based code.
What if you have somebody new to school that hasn't done this? What do you do?
So if it's a brand new student,
Yeah.
I'm still teaching the lessons. If they come in late, I might not even have them do it. It depends. So if they were new to 6th grade, they don't have to have any experience. You could actually do game development 1 if you want without the introductory course if you really want to. But
Where is the game development? Where is that game development one? Is that the code? That's the code combat? Or
Yeah. Game development is through. So if you got a license through Code Combat, and I believe me, I don't work for them, but
Right.
if you got a license, you have access to Game Development 1, Web Development 1, which is HTML, Computer Science 2, Game Development 2, Web Development 2, Computer Science 3, all 3. I mean, you get that whole. I don't even use half of it. What we ended up doing is we've shared some of the licenses I originally got and pushed them up to the high school.
Right.
So the high school, some of the high school students, if they're interested in coding, the teachers give them access outside of the other stuff they do to use the language.
Does Azaria have the game design feature too?
Yeah. So at the end of the prologue for Ozaria is at the end of the prologue you create I call it almost like a Pac-Man game. At the end of the prologue, and you're creating a game and you're trying to get these different fish or things. So there is kind of a game at the end of that they make, and they can customize it and tweak it and make it their own. There is auto completion here, so I have some students that are not necessarily good at typing or different things. So there is auto completion. You can also turn that off. So some of my students where I'm like, you really should be typing the code, I have them turn it off. Any other questions about that? If you have questions, I have the link in this presentation at the end. Feel free. If you have questions, just ask me afterwards. It's been a positive thing in my class. So drones. We ended up getting the Parrot Mambo. Anyone familiar with these guys? Right. In my opinion, they're great. You used to be able to get them on Amazon and stuff, but now a robotics or a drone company bought them, so they're pretty much marketed through that company now. And we bought I think 30, with the idea of I'm only really using 12 at a time in my room. But we have 30 to kind of swap out parts if we need to at the moment and stuff like that. They're fantastic little drones for teaching basics. If you're trying to take great pictures, this is not the drone. If you're trying to educate students about drones, this would work great. So I like the fact that it's block-based coding. So this is what I do in 7th grade, and this is new this year. I started it this year, so I'm learning. I've learned what not to do already, and I'm adjusting, but it's relatively new. Syncs with Google Classroom. When we use Workbench, we can create assignments, and then I put a note that each drone's different, right? So the parameters, we tried to develop a list of parameters when flying these, like don't go past this number, etc. But every drone responds a little differently. So it's kind of tough to do that, but these are great. What I end up doing, so we're in the cab, and I have shifts. So I made these targets out of foam boards, and then I have all the students behind the flight zone. So hopefully no one gets hit. But they all have, and then we have a rotation. I'll show you. There's a rotation schedule. So like at any given time, there's only 4 drones flying, and they're flying in a path. That's it. And then they rotate back, and then the next pair goes, and they rotate back. So it's not like I have 12 drones just flying all over the place. It's been a systematic approach to try to keep it safe. I can tell you one thing though. In 7th grade, it's been a huge hit. Some of my students that I teach them for 5 years, some of my students that I have a hard time trying to get motivated and do things, did this in a heartbeat. They're the ones that grabbed the computers to code it. Like it was an instant, they were into it. And I think it's where their future is, more than ours, right? So it's important. When we look at that, we program it through Workbench. So this is the programming. You basically connect the drones through a Bluetooth, and then you get these commands just like block-based coding, and you're able to code it. You can have it fly up, you can have it do a flip, you can have it fly for X amount of seconds. So what we tried to do was set up, okay, we want the drone to take off, fly 3 feet, and land. What are those numbers? All right, so now if we take those numbers and we add on this amount of feet, how far do we need to fly down to the obstacle course to land on the circle? So we're trying to use not just, let's guess and see what happens. We're trying to use math and make our predictions on what the drones will do. Within this, it connects to Google Classroom. So you can very easily set up classes. You can add different lessons to it. So like I set up 7th grade, I pulled in 7th grade, whatever. Over here you can see that the classes are my first Lego League club. Those students play around with them. So you can set up classes and then you can assign activities to them for the drones.
To the workbench?
Yep. Yeah, so if I look at 7, it's not going to work, but you would see, like, I have all, basically it pulls in the class names from Google Classroom. Jack, did I do this when you sat there?
Yes.
It might not pull it in right now, but yeah, there it is. So it pulls in that, and then you can actually take lessons that Workbench has made, or you can create your own and tie those assignments in. So that's what we do from a drone perspective. So how I set that up, this is kind of an example. What I was talking about, so I have them in pairs, and then that's their drone ID number for when they're connected Bluetooth. Then I have a round 1, round 2, round 3, ABCD. So in the cafeteria, round 1 goes first, and I have basically people at tables ABCD. Round 1 goes, they fly through it, and then I do round 2, fly through it, round 3, fly through it.
What's the approximate battery life?
That's a great question. You're looking at 7 or 8 minutes. Yeah, so we ordered a whole, I have 2 batteries for every drone. So if we needed it, but typically we set up the lesson in my room and kind of set up the parameters and do some things, and then walk to the caf for maybe the last 30 minutes. And cycling through, we always make it. We've actually never really had a battery die. But we have a second battery for every drone if we need it. So yeah, but we kind of do, I ended up making up this rotation schedule, and it works. The only issue I ever had, and it just happened to be when the principal was there, is a girl hit run on her program, and the drone that was on the table flew up, not the one that was on the floor that was supposed to take off. So the girl put the wrong drone on the floor. So that to me is like, all right, I need to label the drones better so that they have a clear understanding of this is, I numbered them, but it's not easy to read. So that was a teacher moment where like, that's my fault, I eat it. But it's been a neat process. Yeah.
Now, you said each drone's different, as in like if you programmed each of them to fly forward for 2 seconds, they'd end up at different.
It might not, yeah. It's not going to necessarily be the same.
Just because the code works on this drone here, you can't transfer over
Yeah.
the same on the other.
Yeah. And that's I should have known that going into it, but yeah, I learned as I went. So like something like this is a document I set up for them. So if it flies forward for 1 second at 50% power, what's the distance it traveled? So I have them program the drone to do that, and then they measure how far it traveled. And for some of us, it's estimating, because I have square tiles on my floor that are 12 inches, right? So we're counting the tiles and figuring it out that way, or we're measuring with tape. So that if we do half a second forward at 100% power, what's that? And then we flip it around. So any yellow space is something that the students have to answer. But what we're doing there is trying to find, there's not one answer that's right. So if I have 12 groups of students submit this, all of those answers very well could be different, because the drone's different, you know? So, any other questions? So this is kind of one of the activities I do before we go to the cafeteria. There's a whole list of parameters and stuff that we explore before we actually make the move and fly them, I would say. But that kind of... I'll just bring you the box. It's easier.
I was just looking at them.
There's battery if you want to play with it.
It's like $600.
Yeah, they're not, for a class set, it's not that bad. It's really not bad.
You should have them too. Somebody I use has a lending library, and some of them have drones, some of them don't.
It's, if you haven't explored that, depending on what you're teaching, it's worth looking into. I say that because I think there's a lot of benefits. We're teaching coding, we're teaching math, and a lot of other things, but it's also their future. And I think part of it's educating them, for me, about the laws and where that is. Like, you can't just go fly, especially if there's an airport nearby. Like, students don't necessarily get that. They get a drone for Christmas and they just go fly it. So a lot of it for me is teaching the students about safety and about the rules and regulations before we even fly anything. So, questions about that? So that's kind of computer science track. 8th grade's a little different. We could talk about that later. This is one of my favorite videos. You might have seen this before. If you've seen it before, you appreciate it. If you haven't seen it, you're gonna watch it. It's great. I don't know how loud it's gonna be.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's nothing else left to do, is it?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he could fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I move to the music. Step to the beat. I woke up today, canceled all my plans, and I stepped right outside with my guitar in my hands and the notes.
So I love that video. If you haven't seen it, there you go. But I show it to 6th grade, and I show it to 6th grade 2 possible areas. Usually balloon-powered cars. We do balloon-powered cars. They think it's easy. They find out it's not easy, right? So right around the time where like they blow up their balloon and it goes nowhere, I show that video. Because what are all the 6th graders gonna say? Yeah, all the sixth graders are like, just walk up the steps, walk up the escalator. So we watched that video and they're all frustrated, and I'm like, guys, you're stuck on the escalator right now. Like, you could solve your problem, you just need to walk up. And so I talked with the class after they like solved the problem. I'm like, you guys are in the same boat. So then the rest of the lesson, or lessons, when they ask me something that I believe they could solve, my response is, you're stuck on an escalator. And they're like, and 90% of the time they figure it out, right? I just walk away and come back. So I think that ties into problem solving school, and I'm sure you've heard the push, but we need to be problem finders too. So I think a lot of times when they're stuck on a problem, it's they haven't found what the actual issue is. And we need to pinpoint that. So as much as we're teaching problem solving, I think we have to also push for that problem finder aspect to be able to look and find the problems that will make the project or whatever we're working on more successful. So I have the blessed curse of cafeteria duty, which is like, it should be its own movie. It's just a social experiment in middle school. But it's interesting, right? Oh yeah, it's middle school cafeteria. It's just a wild place. But I see students solve problems every day. So like, I would walk by this student, and typically if I saw this picture, I might be frustrated because they're playing with their food. But you guys know what the fork and knife are for? Right? It's because this student didn't want to pick up his milk to drink it. So he extended his straws out so he could sit there and drink his milk from a sitting position, and he had to use the fork and knife to keep that straw in place. And I'm like, there's an everyday moment of like, students solve their own problems all the time, right? Not necessarily in class, but outside of class, and we have to try to find those moments and encourage problem solving, right? So my response was, awesome idea, just make sure you clean up your tray when you're done, right? All right, that leads me to EV3 Lego Mindstorms. I won't spend a ton of time on this. Does anyone have the Mindstorms? Right? Okay, so quite a few of you. I love them. I teach it from grades 4 all the way through 8. And then we have a first Lego League Robotics Club that we go and compete with, the FLL. It's been a really neat thing. This is my scope of how I break it down. So in 4th grade, we do the on-brick apps. I do a 180 challenge, I do a square challenge, then we do basic motor control in the software, and then they have to pass driving school. So these are some of the activities that I do, and I'll show you some videos. In 5th grade, we do kind of a move tank approach. We do an obstacle course, and then they have to draw 2D shapes. So we're looking at triangles or squares or whatever. We are attaching markers to them, and they're programming the robot to draw those 2-dimensional shapes. In 6th grade, they do a Riley Rover challenge for me, like a basic challenge. That challenge involves them like finding the circumference of the wheel to predict how far the robot will go. So if we say drive 3 rotations, they find the circumference, they can figure out it's going to travel this far. So we're kind of using math to program how the distances we want to happen. They do a figure 8 challenge, and then we do color sensor. So in 6th grade, I introduced the color sensor. We do some challenges behind that. In 7th grade, we do the ultrasonic sensor. We start talking about the eyes of the robot. We do a testing for accuracy, so I have them test how accurate the sensor is. We do a RoboVac, so they make robotic vacuums models. And then we do dancing robots, which is probably one of their favorite assignments. I'll show you some examples of that. And then in 8th grade, for me, in 8th grade, it's not so much I'm teaching them new lessons as we're taking all these skills that they've learned from 4th through 7th and applying it. So I do robot Olympics. And we're doing Robot Olympics right now. And I have 3 challenges. I have rescue bots, golf, and sumo bots. And I'll show you examples of those. But we kind of go through those different challenges in 8th grade. So it's not so much me teaching them how the sensor works. I help them create the program for sumo bots and explain the basic program, and then they modify it, because that's a little more complex. But I have videos to kind of show you some of these different activities. So this is, if the videos work, if they play. This is the obstacle course, one version, right? So it's driving school for one of the grades is just to literally drive down the road, do the different turns, park in the garage. once they complete that, we do a move block challenge where they have to move the blocks into the different squares. I've turned that into a competition too for the students that are ahead of everyone, and I have two groups kind of see who can do it the fastest to get the blocks to the place. So that's one example. This is just a simple color sensor activity. So in 6th grade, we're learning how to use that color sensor to see the black lines, to tell the robot to stop and then program it. So they're not allowed to use a set number of rotations. They're literally turning the power on and they're using the color sensor for everything that's happening within that course. And then once they get that down, we have stopwatches and they try to make their time faster and beat their time. So that's one of the color sensor ones. This is an example of golf. So in 8th grade, we do the golf challenge. For this, they do make attachments. So they can modify the robot. They can take off the arms and just put a paddle on, which you'll see. Or they can leave the arms on and make a paddle that flips. So it's kind of up to them what pathway they want to go. But they're using Legos in my room and building attachments for it that will help them achieve the challenge. And then they're programming it. So this is another example of another way to do it. Right, so I have different values for the different cups. Their grade is not based on making the cups, right? That's an important, and I'll talk about my grading in a little bit. But the grade is not based on making the cups. The grade is based on, did you do the challenge? Did you do the work in class? Did you use your class time wisely? Right? It's not, did you make a cup? So, this is probably rescue bots. So we're trying to, the cups are different point values and they deploy the robot to pick up the cups and bring it back to base. For this in 8th grade, they can use the color sensor, which is why we use different colors. I ended up not using white because white is too close to the floor, so it wasn't really, the robot wouldn't move because when we used the color sensor for white, it wasn't working. So I've since changed the colors a little bit, but that's the idea. We just took applesauce containers. So each one of the pipe cleaners is a different number of points, and they can add up points. Dancing robots. So dancing robots, they have to program the robot to dance for 60 seconds, and they need to try to sync it with the music, which is tough. Yeah, they make costumes for them. It's supposed to be like one of those baby rockers. So they put beads in it. And the students start laughing because the beads start flying out. That's why they're laughing. You see the one. So I'll explain the challenge then, but they have to program the robot to dance to 60 seconds of music. Has to be school appropriate. They have the option of pairing up and doing partner dances, which I always tell the students, I'm like, it's harder. It's way easier to do that than a partner dance. And most of them still choose the partner dance. And I'm like, it's harder, but they want to work together, and they come out pretty neat. Some of the timing gets off, so I'm a musician and it bothers me, but this song is really hard to hear, but it's Firefly, I think. Right? It's good. The one robot freezes, and they got mad.
It'd be hard with tango.
So one of these freezes, and it's like, again, their grade's not based on, their grade's based on a rubric. It's not based on, that robot froze, they were mad. It's like, it's okay. I gotta keep going because I'm almost out of time. But this one's good. Watch this one. This is 7.
This time, we're gonna get funky.
Clap your hands. All right, now, we're going to do the basic step. To the left. Take it back now, y'all. One hop this time. Right foot, left stump. Left foot, left stump. Cha-cha, real smooth.
Smart, right?
To the left. Take it back now, y'all. One hop this time. Right foot, left stump. Left foot, left stump. Cha-cha now, y'all. Now it's time to get funky.
So they got mad because the one robot is about a second off now.
Take it back now, y'all. One hop this time. One hop this time. Right foot, 2 stumps. Left foot, 2 stumps. Slide to the left. Slide to the right. Crisscross. Crisscross. Chop, chop, real smooth.
So that's my
I have a question.
examples of that. Yeah.
Do you have materials issues in terms of like having enough?
What are you looking for? See that? That's why you're looking for that.
Work, or like do you have to share them across class?
Exactly.
That's what you do?
So I have 12 robots. They ordered 16, but I have 12 out that I use. The other ones are for the club. They're all numbered. And then, so every student, I have 1 through 12. I pair them up with pairs. They're assigned robot 1. They're responsible for robot 1, which is why in 8th grade, that SumoBot one you just saw and stuff, when they make attachments, they can't mess up the base core model. Because in 4th grade, they're using that base core model. So in 8th grade, they can't necessarily redesign the robot, but they can add attachments to it. They can do that type of stuff. That doesn't affect the educator model. But I also try to time it, so like right now, 7th grade is finishing up dancing robots. When I go back to school, it's performance day. So I videotape them and they have their robots perform. But 4th grade, 5th grade, they haven't even started robots. So I try to time it so it's not 6, 7, and 8th grade all doing robots. So like 6th grade's coding right now, 7th grade is robotics, 8th grade is at the moment robotics, because that's we do a water rocket project, but I can't do that until the spring because of weather. So I kind of jumble it around, but they all share the same robots.
How many classes of each grade level do you have?
I teach a lot of kids. So I have 5 4th grade classes, 5 5th grade classes, and then in middle school, like right now, I have 2 8th grade sections, 3 7th grade sections, and 2 6th grade sections. Last semester I had 3 8th grade sections, 2 7th grade, 2 6th.
So it's possible to make it work if you have 6 classes of 6th graders and 6 classes of 7th graders.
I'd say yeah. Yeah, you just have to have it rotated correctly. Yeah.
At the primary level, do you guys have like STEM?
Yeah, so K to 3, we have a STEM program down there. They use the Sphero, I believe, and the Robot Duo, whatever those robots are. Dot Dash. They do some of that preliminary stuff. But we do have a K to 3 program. Yeah.
With these, I think this is kind of everybody's question. Like my problem is, I see kids every day, so they can't build. They have to do it all in one class period. Is that how yours is set up?
So like that dancing robot lesson will take us like 7 or 8 classes at least.
So do you have the same kids for that block of time, and then you have a different 5th grade? And
Correct.
Oh, see, mine's like 5th grade A, 5th grade B every single day. So okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't work as well that way.
So I try to just I don't know how I do it, but I do it. I'm gonna fly through some of this because we're almost out of time. I'll share the link for this presentation, but this is some of the stuff. So like in 4th grade, when I'm doing 4th grade, I'm having the students play with the different powers for 3 seconds. They measure that distance, and then we find the average of that distance. So they're doing math. They're programming the robot, and they're playing with robots, and they love it, 4th and 5th grade especially when they start. But also, they never, ever, ever have given me a problem like, we're doing math, we have to find the average. Like, never. They just do it. And it's, I think, because they're doing it through robotics. Like, they're doing it through something different. But I'm trying to reinforce some of those basic skills. So these are just some of the activities that I do. From a rubric standpoint, I teach the whole building. So I can't sit there and grade a million things. So I have a system developed. I do everything in Google Sheets, and the students grade themselves. and then they turn it into me. So their color, they come in and they color the square yellow. Like, so if they programmed it, they finished the obstacle course, they used their class time wisely, positive attitude, answered this question, they color all those yellow, that's 100%. And I open up every single student, I look at the colors, if I agree, I give them the grade. If I disagree, I put my teacher color in. So if they gave themselves yellow here and I disagree, I come in and I'll put the teacher blue there, so when they go back, they can see where they lost a point. I can tell you, 9.5 out of 10 times, I agree with every student. Sometimes they're harder on themselves. And I'm like, they'll put themselves here. I'm like, no, you were here. Calm down. So I don't know how you do grades, but everything I'm doing, I'm just going to fly through these. So for dancing robots, they have to first plan everything out. So I'm teaching music. I'm teaching what the intro is, what the chorus is, what the verse is, the pre-chorus if there is one. They label those sections. They label the time in the videos. And then they come up with a description of what the robots are doing. This is an example of the testing for accuracy. So we're using the ultrasonic sensor to measure those different distances. That's the program we use, and then we're seeing how accurate the robot is. These are some of the documents for the different robot mini golf, sumo bots, stuff that I do. 3D printing, in a nutshell, I'm going to skip these videos. We use Tinkercad and AstroPrint for 3D printing. In 5th grade, I do basic skills. So we either do a keychain or a Christmas ornament. It's kind of up to them. And I'm teaching them the basic CAD design skills in Tinkercad, primarily cutting a hole and such. And then, I don't have time to show you this video. When I share my presentation, I recommend you watch the video. I try to make it a point to the students that you can change lives with these things that you're doing. And in this particular video, you'll feel something when you watch it. So we don't have time to watch it now. I recommend going and looking at it. And I literally show it to my students. And you know, when I look at the students after the video, you can tell they feel something. They feel something after watching that video. The whole point is we can use 3D printing to create a keychain, but we can also use 3D printing. It's great for kids right now because of how kids grow. They're able to 3D print different things for them as they grow a lot easier than they could in the past for like stuff like that. So I try to make those real life connections for students and have them feel something. In 8th grade for 3D printing, I give them 4 options. They can print for class, build, top, and design a gadget, solve problems. So how I do that, all of my lessons, I do Google Sheets. And I do Google Sheets because all I do is each tab has what the students need to do. So they work through that one document. So they do the first part of it, then they come here, they're telling me my choice, then they're coming here, they're doing research, and they just click through the tab, so it's one document. There's a lot of different things we do with 3D printing, but that's the brief version of it. And then rubrics and assessments, I kind of did share that with you guys, but it's all, like this is the dancing robot rubric. So they need 60 seconds or more. The robotic movements are synced, right, with the music. They consistently work. They focus with their team members. They reflect on their success at the end. So it's all rubric based. It all comes back to the same color system. They grade themselves. So every lesson I'm saying, this is how you get 100. And I put it in Google Classroom. And then when they're done, they grade themselves, turn it in, and then I check it. But it makes life a lot easier when you're teaching an entire building of students, right? So, and the complexity of the rubric changes based on whatever class I'm teaching. But that's like the 8th grade rescue bots. These examples are here for you guys. I didn't really talk about this. My session wasn't about these, but some of the projects we do are blue power cars, water rockets, toothpick bridges, stroll bridges, helmet challenge. They design helmets for an egg. STEM careers, so I have a whole STEM career lesson that 8th grade does, where they kind of pick their own project and they work on a STEM career project. So there's an example, if you take my link at the end of this, I made copies of some of these documents, so it's yours. If you want to download it and change the document or do something, feel free to do so. So I really rushed through the end of that. But I wanted to make sure the tiny URL, it's funny, it actually turned out to the tin stem. The tin stem. So if you remember the tin stem, that brings you to my presentation. You are more than welcome to take and use anything you want. There's some videos in there that I skipped that I would recommend watching and sharing with students, right? And then if you have any questions as you go through this world of STEM, I'm changing my stuff every year. I've never done the same thing. And I fail forward. I've had some of these lessons flop in my face and then I adjust them and make them work. So if you ever have questions or need something, just reach out to me. Send me an email. If you want me to send you something, I can send you something. Do you have questions for the last 4 minutes here? Anyone? I mean, if you do, feel free to come up at, yeah.
I don't have a question, but I know you do a lot with EV3. Have you
Yeah.
ever done the catapult challenge?
The catapult challenge?
Yeah.
No.
So you build a catapult of some kind, and then you have to have the kids use the motors as the catapult throw things over a barrier to knock over a tower. So it's just something else.
I've done it in 5th grade. I did Choose Your Own Pathway at the end of the year, and they could build the catapult launchers to launch ping balls from the golf balls. But I haven't extended it that way. So yeah, so I could take that and add on to what they do in 5th grade if they choose that path. So, thank you so much for coming. If you have questions, please let me know. I'll rush the end.
Hey, you wanna? I do like the same grades as you do.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd be interested. I came up with this last year. I think it's
Yeah.
like 4 bucks.
Can you send that to me?
Yeah. I got like the drawings.
That's pretty neat.
And
I'm
able to do it I'm doing it with 8th graders. But the thing is they do this project first.
Gotcha.
This whole thing has like assemblies. I think this takes about
6th grade, somewhere on my schedule. They haven't announced.
This like now they don't.
You could have taken it. I would have known.
I don't know.
Thank you.
I have like one of these things. It's like one of those.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I used to do this for so long that it's like
I think my next step is going to be flashlights. I have a buddy of mine sent me a project that's kind of similar to this, but it's designing a